I never thought I'd be the one with a mugshot, but here I am with a criminal record while my ex-husband is living his best life. My name is Melanie. I'm 28 and I married Harold when I was 21 and he was 35. It wasn't supposed to end like this. Harold and I seemed perfect at first. He had this whole established life thing going. Nice condo, decent car, steady career in corporate something or other that I never fully understood. I was just starting my medical billing job and still had roommates when we met at a mutual friend's barbecue. Harold seemed so put together compared to the guys my age who couldn't even remember to buy toilet paper. The first 2 years were honestly amazing. He took me on real vacations, not just weekend trips to someone's lake house, but actual resorts with those fancy drinks that come with little umbrellas. We moved into his condo, and I felt like I'd skipped ahead in life. My friends were jealous, and I loved it. Then things started to shift. Harold got promoted, which should have been great, but suddenly he was working later and later. I'd be sitting at home scrolling through Instagram while he was networking or whatever at business dinners. I started getting this weird feeling like I was just a trophy wife. The young, pretty thing he came home to after impressing his coworkers. That's when I started picking fights. At first, they were just normal arguments. Why didn't he text me back? Why was he always working? Why couldn't we go out more often? But something inside me just snapped one night. He came home late again, all apologetic, with takeout from my favorite place, and I just hurled the container against the wall. The look on Harold's face. I still remember it. Shocked, hurt, but he just quietly cleaned it up while I screamed at him. I knew he wouldn't hit back. Harold had this whole never lay hands on a woman thing from watching his dad treat his mom badly growing up. So I pushed and pushed. I'd smack his arm during arguments, throw the TV remote, slam doors in his face. One time, I actually slapped him when he told me I was acting childish. The worst part? I felt powerful when I did it. Around everyone else, I was sweet Melanie, who married that nice older guy. My family loved Harold. Our friends thought we were couple goals. Nobody knew what happened behind closed doors, how I'd turn into this raging monster the second we were alone. I'd cry to my bestie Trisha about how Harold was emotionally unavailable and controlling with money, never mentioning how I'd maxed out our joint credit card or thrown his laptop on the floor. 7 years in, I could tell Harold was getting worn down. He started working even more, probably to avoid coming home. That's when I found statements from his meeting with a financial advisor. Harold had been moving some money around, opening new accounts. My first thought wasn't, maybe he's organizing our retirement. It was, this bastard is preparing to leave me and hide his money. I went straight to Trisha's place and just lost it. Trisha's the one who first planted the idea. If he divorces you, he'll get everything since he had it all before you, she said. Unless you can prove he was abusive. Then you'd get way more in the settlement, and everyone would support you instead of him. I laughed it off at first. But then I went home and Harold wasn't there. Again. I started thinking about how unfair it all was. The more I thought about it, the more I convinced myself that he was emotionally abusive. And if he was emotionally abusive, was it really such a stretch to say he was physically abusive too? I started researching divorce laws in our state that night. Turns out, Trisha was right. If I could prove Harold was abusive, I'd get a much better settlement. I started taking photos of any bruise I got, from bumping into furniture, from my kickboxing class, whatever. I started a journal, backdating entries about incidents that never happened. I practiced my crying face in the mirror, all while still smacking Harold around whenever I felt like it. The divorce plan quickly became my obsession. I made an appointment with this shark of a divorce attorney Trisha recommended. When I sat down with Vanessa, the attorney, I mentioned Harold's controlling behavior and watched her expression shift from professional to predatory. Georgia is an equitable distribution state, she explained. Without evidence of misconduct, you'd likely get some alimony since he earns more, but the split won't be as favorable since you've only been married 7 years and you work. I felt my stomach drop. 7 years with Harold and all I'd get was some alimony? But, Vanessa continued, leaning forward, if there was evidence of domestic violence, the court tends to be much more sympathetic to the victim. She passed me her card with a domestic violence hotline number written on the back. Just in case you need it. I didn't, but I took it anyway. That night, I started my plan in earnest. I opened a separate bank account and slowly began transferring small amounts from our joint savings. I'd intentionally pick fights with Harold, recording audio on my phone hidden in my pocket. Then I'd edit the recordings, cutting out my provocations and just keeping his frustrated responses. I researched domestic violence patterns online and started using those exact phrases in texts to friends. Walking on eggshells, cycle of abuse, love bombing. I even went as far as to splash water on my face before taking selfies, making it look like I'd been crying. When Harold would accidentally bump into me in our narrow hallway, I'd secretly mark the spot with my fingernails and then photograph the red marks later, making them look worse than they were. The most effective part of my plan was involving our families. I started with subtle comments to my parents about how controlling Harold had become. I'd call my mom in fake distress, saying things like, "I don't know if I should tell you this, but," before sharing some exaggerated version of a normal argument. I did the same with Harold's sister, who I'd always been close with. Meanwhile, I was still the one getting physical during our arguments. One night, I threw a coffee mug at Harold that shattered against the wall. Instead of apologizing, I screamed, "Look what you made me do." He just stood there, this defeated look on his face, before quietly getting the broom. I started telling Trisha everything, the real everything, not the sanitized version I told others. She became my co-conspirator, coaching me on what to say to make Harold look worse. "You need to establish a pattern," she advised over wine one night. "Start telling people you're afraid of him. Act jumpy when he comes into a room. If you have bruises from the gym, don't explain them, just let people wonder." I followed her advice perfectly. At a dinner party, I flinched when Harold reached for the salt next to me. Our friend Diane noticed, and I saw her exchange glances with her husband. The seed was planted. What I didn't know then was that Harold wasn't as clueless as I thought. The money moves I'd discovered weren't him hiding assets. He'd actually been talking to a financial advisor about setting up a surprise second honeymoon fund for our upcoming anniversary. And after that night I threw the coffee mug, he'd started keeping his own records. Harold had installed a small camera in our living room bookshelf, capturing my outbursts and physical aggression, but I was too wrapped up in my plan to notice the warning signs. The day I filed for divorce was exhilarating. I wore my most conservative outfit, a navy pencil skirt and cream blouse that made me look like the perfect wounded wife, and met Vanessa at the courthouse. I brought my folder of evidence, including photos of bruises, my detailed journal of made-up incidents, and the edited audio recordings. "We'll file for an emergency protective order along with the divorce petition," Vanessa said. "Your husband will be removed from the home immediately." Something twisted in my stomach. Not guilt, but excitement. The power was intoxicating. Within hours, officers served Harold with papers at his office, in front of his colleagues, his boss, everyone. The protective order meant he couldn't come home, couldn't contact me, couldn't come within 500 feet of me. He had to grab a hotel room with just the clothes on his back and whatever he had at the office. When Vanessa called to tell me it was done, I celebrated with Trisha over champagne. "To freedom," I toasted, clinking glasses in what used to be Harold's and my living room. The supportive messages started flooding in immediately. My mom called crying, saying she'd always sensed something was wrong. Harold's sister texted that she was heartbroken, but stood with me. Friends I hadn't talked to in months reached out offering spare rooms, shoulders to cry on, and character witnesses. I played the role perfectly, the brave survivor finally escaping her abuser. I spoke in a slightly softer voice. I added a subtle flinch when someone moved too quickly. I mastered the art of the grateful, tearful smile when someone offered support. But there were cracks in my performance. When Harold's mother called, devastated and confused about the son she thought she knew, I struggled to maintain my story. This woman had welcomed me into her family, treated me like a daughter. The pain in her voice was real. Then there was the look on Harold's face, the one time I saw him from across the courthouse parking lot after the initial hearing. Not anger. Not even hurt anymore. just a calm, resolved expression that made my skin prickle. Vanessa was thrilled with how things were progressing. The judge had extended the protective order. Our divorce case was fast-tracked due to the abuse allegations. Vanessa was already talking settlements, mentioning numbers that made my eyes widen. Then came the first hiccup. Harold's attorney filed a comprehensive response denying all allegations and requesting full access to my phone records, emails, and text messages for discovery. Standard procedure, Vanessa assured me, just a fishing expedition. They've got nothing. But that night, I frantically scrolled through my text history with Trisha. All those messages, planning, strategizing, admitting what I was doing. I began deleting the most damning ones, but there were so many. 2 days later, Harold's attorney filed a motion including a flash drive with video evidence. My heart stopped when I read the filing. Video? What video? Vanessa called me into her office. Her tone had changed. Melanie, she said slowly, is there anything you haven't told me? Anything at all about your relationship with Harold? I shook my head, maintaining my innocent facade. No, nothing. He's just trying to scare me. Well, his attorney has submitted home security footage that they claim shows you as the aggressor in your relationship. They're alleging that you fabricated the abuse claims. My mouth went dry. The bookshelf camera. It had to be. How long had it been there? How much had it seen? They're bluffing, I said, but my voice wavered. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. For your sake, I hope so. Because if they're not, we're looking at potential perjury charges, filing false reports, and misuse of the court's resources. This isn't just about your divorce settlement anymore. As I left her office, my phone pinged with a text from Trisha. We need to talk. Now. Harold's lawyer contacted me about a deposition. I felt the carefully constructed world I'd built beginning to crumble around me. The next 2 weeks were the worst of my life. I met Trisha at a coffee shop far from our usual spots. She was already there when I arrived, nervously shredding a napkin. What did you tell them? I demanded before even sitting down. Nothing yet, she whispered. But Mel, they have our texts. All of them. Harold's lawyer sent screenshots. My stomach dropped. How? I deleted them. They had some tech guy recover them from the cloud or something. I don't know. She looked around anxiously. I can't perjure myself, Mel. I could lose my nursing license, my whole career. I felt the panic rising. So what, you're just gonna throw me under the bus? After you helped me plan everything? You were the one who actually did it, Trisha hissed. I never thought you'd take it this far. I never thought you'd actually file false charges. I left her there, my supposed best friend, knowing she'd tell Harold's lawyers everything to save herself. On my drive home, Vanessa called. The judge wanted to review the video evidence privately before deciding on next steps. The next morning, a courier delivered a package to my door. Inside was a USB drive and a letter from Harold's attorney. Before we proceed further, my client wanted you to have the opportunity to review this evidence. We have much more. We suggest you reconsider your position immediately. With shaking hands, I plugged the drive into my laptop. The videos started playing. Dozens of clips from what must have been months of secret recording. There I was, screaming at Harold, throwing things, shoving him, slapping him when he tried to walk away. In one particularly damning clip, I could be heard clearly saying, "What are you gonna do, hit me back? You know you can't." By that afternoon, Vanessa had called an emergency meeting with Harold's attorney. I sat across from Harold for the first time since this all began. He looked different, stronger somehow, less beaten down. We're prepared to offer a deal, his attorney said crisply. Mr. Wilson will not pursue criminal charges for domestic violence, false reporting, or attempted extortion if Ms. Wilson agrees to retract all abuse allegations immediately, issue a formal apology, agree to an equitable division of assets based on premarital contributions, and sign a non-disclosure agreement about the circumstances of the divorce. Vanessa looked at me. This is extremely generous considering the evidence. I felt cornered. What about alimony? Harold's attorney actually laughed. Alimony? Miss Wilson, you're facing potential felony charges. You should be concerned about avoiding jail time, not securing alimony. I signed the agreement that afternoon, thinking the nightmare was finally over. I was wrong. 2 days later, I was called into my supervisor's office at the medical billing company. Someone had sent them the videos. They couldn't have an employee who had filed false domestic violence claims and committed perjury, handling sensitive patient information. I was terminated immediately. Then it got worse. The prosecutor's office contacted me directly. Despite Harold's agreement not to press charges, they were moving forward with a criminal investigation based on the evidence that had now become part of the public record. The state was charging me with filing a false report, perjury, and misuse of emergency protective orders. Trisha wasn't answering my calls. My parents, who had seen the videos Harold's mother reluctantly showed them, were taking some time to process everything. Friends who had rallied around me were now silent or openly hostile. I had to hire a criminal defense attorney I couldn't afford. My new lawyer was blunt. The evidence is overwhelming. You lied to the court, fabricated abuse claims, and there's a documented pattern of you being the abusive partner. Our best option is to negotiate a plea deal. The legal system I'd tried to manipulate came down on me with full force. My criminal case dragged on for months. I moved out of what had been our home into a tiny studio apartment I could barely afford. No one would hire me once they ran a background check and saw the pending charges. My defense attorney managed to negotiate a plea deal that kept me out of jail. But the terms were harsh. 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory anger management therapy, and a permanent criminal record. I'd also have to pay $15,000 in restitution for the costs incurred by the false claims. The judge at my sentencing was a stern older woman who had no sympathy for me. "Miss Wilson," she said, looking down from the bench, "your actions show a disturbing level of calculation and disregard for the truth. You have not only abused your husband and the legal system, but you have damaged the credibility of genuine domestic violence victims everywhere. Every false claim makes it harder for real victims to be believed." The divorce was finalized during this same period. Instead of the favorable settlement I'd dreamed of, I walked away with basically nothing. The judge awarded Harold the condo, his retirement funds, and most of our joint assets due to his premarital contributions. I got my car, which still had payments, my personal belongings, and my own retirement account. Oh, and all my legal debts. The community service was particularly humiliating. I was assigned to a local women's shelter. A cruel irony that wasn't lost on me. The director clearly knew why I was there and watched me like a hawk. The real domestic violence survivors who came through those doors made me uncomfortable. Their fear was genuine, their bruises real, their trauma palpable. The mandatory therapy sessions were even worse. My therapist, Dr. Chen, wouldn't accept any of my excuses or deflections. "You're still not taking responsibility for your actions," she noted during our third session, after I'd spent 30 minutes explaining how everyone else had contributed to my situation. "What do you want me to say?" I snapped. "That I'm a terrible person?" "Fine, I'm terrible. Self-flagellation isn't accountability either," she replied calmly. "It's just another way to avoid looking at the real issues." I hated her for being right. The worst part was the total isolation. My parents eventually started speaking to me again, but it was strained. My mom would sigh and say things like, "Where did we go wrong with you, Melanie?" Friends had taken sides, and most weren't on mine. Trisha had moved to another city, allegedly for a job opportunity, but I knew she was running from the fallout of my case. I tried dating again after about 6 months, but it was a disaster. Anyone I met online would eventually Google me, and my case had made enough local news that it was easy to find. One guy actually confronted me on our second date, saying his sister had been in an abusive relationship, and people like me made him sick. Meanwhile, Harold was thriving. Through mutual connections, I heard he'd received a promotion at work. His LinkedIn showed him smiling in company photos, looking happier and more confident than I'd seen him in years. The divorce hadn't hurt his reputation at all. If anything, surviving my false allegations had garnered him sympathy. What stung the most was seeing photos on social media of him with his new girlfriend about 8 months after our divorce. She was around his age, professionally successful, and obviously besotted with him. Their vacation pictures showed them hiking in Colorado, both looking healthy and radiant. I actually tried to message her once, creating a fake profile, warning her about Harold's true nature. but she never responded, and the profile got suspended for suspicious activity. I later heard through the grapevine that Harold had told her everything about our marriage from the beginning. She knew my tactics and wasn't falling for them. By the 1-year anniversary of my plea deal, I was still struggling to put my life back together. The job market was closed to me. My credit was ruined. My reputation was destroyed. And I had no one to blame but myself. Though I still tried to find others to blame. I joined an online forum for people dealing with the aftermath of divorce, carefully phrasing my situation to make myself sound like the victim. I described how the legal system had failed me, how my husband had used his resources to twist everything around, how I was struggling while he moved on easily. The supportive comments poured in at first, people sharing similar stories of feeling railroaded by ex-spouses with better lawyers. I soaked up the validation, finally feeling understood. Then came the message that changed everything. "I've been following your posts for a while," it began. At first, I sympathized, but something felt off. So I did some digging. "Are you the Melanie Wilson from the Georgia case last year? The one who falsified domestic violence claims?" My heart raced. I immediately denied it, claiming mistaken identity. "I volunteer at a shelter for DV survivors," the message continued. "I've seen what real victims go through. If you are that Melanie, you need to understand the damage you've done, not just to your ex-husband, but to every person who's ever been abused and feared not being believed." I blocked the user, but the damage was done. Within days, the forum moderators contacted me. Someone had sent them news articles about my case. I was banned for creating a toxic environment for genuine survivors. That night, I drank too much wine and did something I'd been avoiding. I really looked at myself. Not the victim narrative I'd crafted. Not the justified avenger I pretended to be. The real me. The woman who physically abused her husband, then tried to destroy him with false allegations when she thought he was planning to leave. The woman who manipulated everyone around her, family, friends, the court system. The woman who still couldn't fully admit what she'd done. For just a moment, I felt the weight of genuine remorse. But it was quickly replaced by something more familiar: bitterness and self-pity. The next day, I started researching states with the best job markets for people with criminal records. I needed a fresh start where no one knew my story. Maybe in California or New York, I could reinvent myself. Create a new narrative about my past, a sanitized version that put me in a better light. I didn't learn my lesson. I just wanted to escape the consequences. 2 years after the divorce, I finally saved enough to move across the country. I practiced my new story during the long drive, how I'd been young and naive, married to an older man who took advantage of me, gone through a complicated divorce. Not exactly honest, but not the blatant lies I'd told before. I found a small apartment in a city where no one knew me, got a job at a call center that didn't look too deeply into my background, started building a new life based on half-truths and omissions. Sometimes I still check Harold's social media. He's engaged to that same woman now. They bought a house together. He looks genuinely happy in a way he never did with me. It still makes me angry, still feels unfair that he gets the perfect life while I'm stuck starting over. But in rare moments of clarity, usually late at night when I can't sleep, I know exactly why our lives took such different paths. Harold was honest, I was not. Harold truly was a victim. I pretended to be one. I don't know if I'll ever fully accept responsibility for what I did. It's easier to keep believing I was somehow wronged, that the system failed me, that Harold deserved what I did to him. That mental gymnastics protects me from facing the truth about myself. So here I am. The woman with the criminal record for lying about domestic violence, still lying, mostly to myself. Still angry at the world instead of at my own choices. Still playing the victim when I was actually the perpetrator. And that might be the saddest ending of all.